where the fun begins.
A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away.
This is Rebel Force Radio.
Your source for the Force.
Star Wars news and commentary.
With Jason Swank and Jimmy Mack.
I've seen Star Wars 500 times.
Star Wars #1!
This station is now the ultimate power in the universe. I suggest we use it.
Now it's time for Rebel Force Radio.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Oh, yeah. Welcome back to Rebel Force Radio. And happy Valentine's Day, all you lovebirds. And for those of you that are unattached, happy Valentine's Day to you, too. Because I understand that for the single folks out there, Valentine's Day can be a little bit lonely. It's like that one day of the year that reminds you if you don't have someone special in your life, but you always have someone special in your life. When you're listening to Rebel Force Radio, we're in your life. We'll be your Valentine. But it is, as Star Wars fans, we can think about, some of the great romantic moments in Star Wars. And I always, I've lamented over the years, over the last, I guess, since Disney kind of took over Star Wars, that there just hasn't been a lot of romance in Star Wars. And if you look at the original trilogy, after the original movie, they thought they had a love triangle on their hands. And then we figured out, fairly shortly after that it wasn't going to be exactly a love triangle, but the relationship and the chemistry between Harrison Ford and Carrie Fisher. And then, of course, in the prequel trilogy, Anakin and Padme. So, it just seemed like that romance was an integral part of the storytelling in Star Wars. And it just didn't quite happen with the sequel trilogy, though there were moments where we thought, this is the romance. So it just didn't happen. So anyway, hopefully Star Wars will find its romantic mojo. But happy Valentine's, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us this week on Rebel Force Radio. No, it's not going to all be about love and mushy stuff. We got some real news we got to cover here on the program. But it's always great to be with you. Thanks for hanging out with us. Really appreciate it. We're going to have a good time here over the next couple of hours. It's just us sitting around talking the wars. And by us, I mean myself. My name is Jason. And with me, as always, my good friend and yours from Chicago, Jimmy Mack.
Hey, Jason. Hey, Star Wars fans. Back for the Lovebird edition of Rebel Force Radio. Before the show started, I said to Jason, I love you. And he said, I know. So, our relationship is going pretty well right now, I would say. I've been doing Star Wars stuff, of course, in the downtime between shows. And one place you won't find much romantic situations going on is the new Star Wars novel, Star Wars Reign of the Empire, The Mask of Fear. It's not out yet. It comes out on the 25th of February. But we got a preview copy here. Jason's holding it up right there.
I got the hardback
on the cover. What's on the cover?
We got Mon Mothma there in the Senate chamber.
Yeah.
All by her lonesome there.
It's a Mon Mothma heavy book. It's about really the fallout that happens politically on Coruscant after Palpatine has declared the Republic is now an empire, and the Clone Wars have come to an end. And so you have this group of politicians who are very concerned, about where this is going and what sort of overreach Palpatine has.
Hey,
and how
Jim, I meant to
ask
you, as you were talking about this last week, and I confess I haven't started. I haven't, but I'm going to listen to it because I'm very interested in this trilogy of books, but Representative Binks, does he show up anywhere? Oh. Because he's really the guy, if we're going to point fingers, I mean, he is the guy that did grant the emergency powers.
Yeah. Some fallout there, some accountability would be nice from the Gungan, He did play a huge role in this. That's very interesting. Now, I'm not deep enough in the book to have come across any Jar Jar Binks appearances.
Okay.
But I am largely dealing with Mon Mothma and Bail Organa and a little bit of Saw Gerrera mixed in there, too. I'm going to go back and rewatch those Onderon stories from the Clone Wars, just because that comes up a lot in the Saw Gerrera sequences. The action is slim in the first part of the book, for sure. I'm probably about 15 chapters in now. And the action is slim. There's been a few things that have happened. I mean, Saw Gerrera does work with a group of mercenaries and pirates and things of that nature. So they get into some scuffles. And Bail Organa finds himself in a crazy situation while he's in a cantina trying to look for someone who can prove some of these documents that Palpatine has released to the public. He's trying to prove they're forgeries. He's trying to crack the whole Palpatine, he's trying to dispute Palpatine's legitimacy. He's trying to expose Palpatine as the guy who brought the end to the Jedi. Because Bail knows. Bail saw things. Bail knows.
Right.
But here's just one example of something that happened. They're discussing children being used by the Jedi to fight in this war. And they discuss the morality of doing something like that.
Are they talking about the Padawans? The Padawans?
Yeah.
Okay.
Specifically. And then we see that one Padawan in Revenge of the Sith who comes rushing out of the Jedi Temple while Bail has parked his speeder alongside.
Okay.
And the clone trooper points his rifle at Bail and says, you can't be here with this whole area is locked down. And then that kid comes flying out of nowhere, who's played by George Lucas's son, Jet. Who's
Zet
like 14
Jukasa.
at the time. Right. And he was like 14 at the time. So the kid gets gunned down. And Bail yells, "No!" and jumps into his speeder and takes off. Well, when we see that in Revenge of the Sith, that looks like a hideous atrocity has taken place. The clone troopers have just gunned down this child right in front of a senator. But it becomes part of the conversation. While these children were actually soldiers fighting on the battlefield per the Jedi. Should they be exempt? And this kid in particular was attacking clone troopers. So where do they draw the line?
Blood is on the hands of the Jedi because that's why the kids were there in the first place. Don't blame the clone. He was just defending himself.
And a lot of this is brought up in an early debate between Bail and Mon Mothma. And Mon has her eyes on the prize. She wants to remove Palpatine from his position of authority in the government. She's trying to blow the whole thing up while Bail is obsessing over this destruction of the Jedi situation that happened at the end of the Clone Wars. And Mon is saying that's small potatoes compared to what she's trying to do. She thinks the public doesn't give a damn about the Jedi. And to what end? Because Palpatine has been so skillful in portraying the Jedi as enemies of the Republic.
Right.
And, this weird religious group that attempted to overthrow the government in a coup. And yes, it was a coup. So it's a really interesting book. So it gets into some of that, just the fallout of Palpatine declaring the Republic is an empire and the end of the Clone Wars, and just how that's thrown the whole galaxy in disarray, and how most people don't see Palpatine as evil who live in the former Republic, now Empire. They see him as the guy who ended the war and made things go back to the way they used to be. At least on the surface, that's how people see it. They're not constantly living in this paranoid sense of fear all the time, despite the
when we see Mon,
The Mask of Fear.
When we see Mon in Andor, she's very much trying to play the role of the. I think at one point even she refers to herself as sort of the bleeding heart, but she's working very much in a clandestine fashion behind the scenes. Sounds like what you're describing. If she is she outward in her wanting to get Palpatine out of office, out of power? Is she out in the public saying this, or is this stuff that's happening behind closed doors? Okay, so she's very much still doing this all.
At the beginning of the book, at least, in the first third of the book, Bail is being the outspoken one.
Okay.
Because he saw it all happen, you know. He knows the Jedi were hunted. He understands that. But just the way the circumstances, they've all been twisted to portray this phony reality to the public that's very easy for the public to consume. And like I said, you're dealing with a society that is relieved the war has come to an end. And they look at Palpatine as the guy who made it all happen. Yeah. So it's very interesting. This is a great place setter for the upcoming Andor Season 2, I think. So the timing of the release of this book, which will be coming out February 25th, is very good. Very good. And I'm enjoying this. I like getting in the heads of Mon Mothma and Bail Organa. It's such a fragile moment in Star Wars history for them.
Yeah.
And a character from the original trilogy makes a cameo early on. Princess Leia. And yes, she is getting her diapers changed.
Wow, you called it. Jimmy Mack already ahead in Reign of the Empire bingo. The square was Princess Leia getting her diaper changed.
Well, it appears that's what's happening in the moment. You know?
Okay.
And so that's what you got to look forward to, all you Princess Leia fans. Infant Leia coming to book stands everywhere. But no, Reign of the Empire Mask of Fear, like I said, it's a good thing to sort of help you adjust from the end of Skeleton Crew and prepare yourself for the beginning of Andor Season 2. So I like the way that they very strategically and smartly are making this release happen just a few months before Andor Season 2. So it's fun. It's good. And like I said, I've been enjoying the audiobook. January Lavoie is the narrator, and she's fabulous. Oh, my God, she's so good. So I like it a lot. Check it out when it gets released. I don't know how much more I'm going to talk about because I don't want to spoil anything here on the show. I want people to enjoy it. But for the most part, what I've been experiencing with this story is really a psychological kind of thing, getting inside these characters' heads. And I'm really enjoying it, too. So, good times. Plus, Saw Gerrera. Can't go wrong with Saw.
All right. Well, as you continue to read, if there are some spoiler-free things you can share with us, that would be great.
Sure.
All right. Okay. Let's check in with some of the RFR listeners, see what's on their mind.
Must contact me.
Play back the entire message.
What message? Message after the message.
The Emperor commands you to make contact with him. It's a trick. Send no reply.
Chuck from Oregon. Been out gambling with my boys tonight. Had a couple to drink. Came home. Solitude. I've been bouncing around trying to listen to a couple different podcasts other than Star Wars, trying to switch things up. But God, the production value, all that, so boring. God, there's so many podcasts out there that just, the length, the production value, all that just does not add up. I think you guys are the first podcast I've ever listened to my whole life, and I've just hit the 5-year mark listening to you guys, and feel so spoiled because not only do I love Star Wars, but just I expected other podcasts to be on your guys' level because I was not familiar with podcasts 5 years ago, and now I am. And I can maybe last 20 minutes before I get bored and want to turn music back on. So that is a testament to what you guys do. Keep it going. I agree with you guys probably 80% of the time. There's time to time where you guys say some stuff I'm like, eh. But we all have our preference. We all love Star Wars. We all love entertainment. yada, yada. Just saying, keep it up, boys. Just keep grinding. Love it. I'm going to be sad if you guys ever end soon.
I'm going to be sad too.
Much love. Love you guys.
Thanks, man.
Nice.
I don't want to end soon.
Soon. If you're ever going to end soon.
That's really nice. That's really appreciate the compliments. And when it comes to the production, obviously those who've been listening to us for a long time. I mean, Jimmy Mack has got decades of experience in audio production and just does an incredible job making sure that the quality of what we put out there matches hopefully the quality of the conversation, the quality of our listeners and the community we have here at RFR, and he does that in spades. But I feel what our caller is talking about. There's times where I'll get kind of I'd like to learn more about this topic, or I want to hear people talking about this particular movie, or whatever it is. And you kind of go on the Apple Podcast, you go look, and you're expecting a certain something, and it's not always that way. This stuff's not easy, but I do think that it helps coming in. Jimmy Mack comes in with obviously the professional experience, and I come in with a deep love of the medium of talk radio and sort of some of my idols that I've grown up listening to over the years. And so I'm trying to bring that into it and have been bringing that, to it for a lot of years. So I think it takes a little bit more than just, I want to start a podcast. That's maybe the beginning, but that's not, you need a lot more than that.
I like the medium just for giving me the opportunity to create, to satisfy my creative Jones. And the thing that makes it so exciting for me is that it's Star Wars based. So I'm very passionate about it. I'm very passionate about radio production. I'm very passionate about Star Wars. So I appreciate you saying those things, Chuck, because it really means a lot to me. And as far as listening to other Star Wars podcasts, well, dude, you got what you deserve, man. What are you doing drifting away from you're drifting away from the home team here. It's you get what you deserve in that situation. So,
well, we definitely appreciate the compliments. It really is nice to hear. It's very nice. Not necessary, but it's nice to hear.
Right.
All right, so that was that was a little, I guess, self-serving. So let's get in here and let's listen to what other folks have in mind. See if there's any good topics here on.
Hey, Jason.
Star Wars.
Hey, Jimmy. This is Eric from Phoenix, and I'm listening to the most recent weekly episode, and you had a voicemail about Finn and some further adventures of Finn. And in that, you guys are talking about The Force Awakening. And, where did that start or what did that look like? And I'll give you the moment. I think The Force Awakened in The Force Awakens, and that's with Finn. When they land on, to take out Lor San Tekka, there's a scene in that movie in the very beginning where a wounded stormtrooper comes by Finn and puts his bloody hand on Finn's helmet. And when that happens, you hear a musical cue. And I believe that's the cue used for the Force. And to me, that's when the Force Awakens is through Finn at that moment. And then, of course, that compels him to stop fighting. Then he helps Poe escape, which then allows them to interact with Rey. So anyway, that's my 2 cents. That's the way I've always viewed it. And I think that music cue is the sign that the Force has been awakened. Anyway, keep up the great work, and I'm going to go back to listening to this weekly episode. Take care, guys. Bye.
All right. I pulled the clip, so I have the video of the particular moment that he's talking about. So I'm going to go ahead and play this and listen for what he claims is and I'm Mac, obviously you're going to be the guy to tell us whether or not we're actually hearing what Eric thinks we're hearing, which is some sort of a forced cue, sound effect, something. So here it is. anything that made me think of the Force. In fact, if I heard anything, it was something that made me think about Kylo Ren and the dark side and the First Order. There wasn't anything in this clip, and I watched it a few times before we went on air. And I'm not hearing what Eric is either remembering or what he's claiming to hear.
Yeah, I don't really hear the Force theme. I think that's maybe what he's saying is something we're supposed to take note of. But with Eric's analysis in my mind, and just let's remove the whole exploration into music cues. And notice that when that trooper puts his hand across Finn's helmet and leaves the bloody handprint there, something does happen to Finn. And it's made very clear by the way it's edited and shot, how he just suddenly, it's like, if you want to talk about The Force Awakens, it sure looks like Finn is acting like a guy who just woke up and found himself in the middle of a blaster fight. So there's blaster bolts going all over the place. Evil flame troopers are setting fire to things like baskets.
Right.
There is one shot, if you watch that sequence, there's one shot where a trooper walks up in a very determined fashion, pulls his flamethrower out, and ignites that flamethrower. And all he's doing is setting this basket on the ground on fire. And I guess that's like... That's
it was one of those Longaberger baskets. It was, it was very expensive. He was really adding insult to injury. A designer basket.
Oh, it was a designer basket. Well, that should have been claimed as a trophy of war and not destroyed.
Hey, this is a nice basket.
I mean, it's rape and plunder. So, you got to plunder that.
Jim, do you recall the deleted? There's a deleted scene for that particular sequence where Finn comes upon, I think if I remember right, it's a mother holding a child. This is after he gets the bloody handprint, and he's supposed to be one of the ones plundering and pillaging and doing all this, and he's got his blaster pointed at her, and she's just looking at him like, please no. And he drops the blaster, and she's able to get away. So this was this awakening, if that's what we want to call it, for Finn, was supposed to have another beat, another moment there in the battlefield. And when you were talking earlier, I thought, we're not supposed to walk away from that scene thinking that Finn was just some rookie stormtrooper that got cold feet, seeing battle for the first time. I don't think that's it. I think you're right. I think Eric is right that if we were to see Finn prior to this, that he probably would have acted in a, sufficient way. It's not like he was, scared or, like I said, a rookie.
However, they did make it a part of the story where it is revealed that is Finn's first mission. So that definitely does get thrown into the conversation. Well, maybe he's just not cut for this kind of thing. But I disagree with that because in The Rise of Skywalker, when he's talking to Jannah and she's explaining to him how she was part of a group of troopers and they had their blasters up. For some reason, they all just put the blasters down. And it's heavily implied in that moment that Finn is like, yeah, that's the Force doing that. And almost as if Finn is understanding of that situation because he went through it himself. So that's why I think those troopers in The Rise of Skywalker were exiled because they refused to fight. That's why Finn left the First Order in The Force Awakens because he refused to fight. And what's doing that? Is it just some sort of foundation of morality within these troopers? I thought Finn was taken into the First Order as a child and trained from birth to become a stormtrooper. So what went wrong? What could possibly go wrong? Living a sheltered existence like that, only knowing one reality, you have no moral compass to look at.
Right.
Because everything, your moral compass only points in one direction all the time. So because of the sheltered upbringing. and the very specific way that these kids were educated to become troopers. So why did Finn choke? And I think it's unfortunate that they made it part of the story saying that, oh, well, it was his first mission. Because then that throws a whole
Yeah, I
monkey
forgot
wrench
that
into
they
the
do
works.
say it's his first combat mission.
They do say that.
Yeah.
That's
it does
wishy-washy.
It is
They should have
wishy-washy,
committed.
yes.
There should have been a
Right.
commitment there. No, this is a seasoned soldier who has been on many missions. How can you explain all of a sudden he puts the blaster rifle down and walks away from the First Order?
Yeah, so they've been wishy-washy. They were wishy-washy with Finn from the beginning, from his very first scene. Was it a
Unfortunately.
crisis of conscience, or was it a rookie freak out? Because it was his first battle.
Do we know in the film itself, is it revealed that that's Finn's first mission? Or is this something that we've gleaned from visual dictionaries and novelizations? That's one thing I'm not sure of. Do they say in the film that it's his first mission?
Yeah, or is
if anybody knows in the chat, let us know. Oh wait, this isn't live. Damn it. Well, I'll tell you, man, I think that it was something that was revealed in outside sources. I can't recall when in the film it was ever said that that was Finn's first mission.
What I'm seeing here in my research is that it is revealed to be FN 2187's first mission in the novelization and in additional materials.
That's what I thought, yeah.
So, could be commentary, JJ commentary, it could be other things, or it could be comic books when they say, additional materials. But it says, but this is backed up. That this idea of it being his first mission is backed up due to his reaction to the violence, suggesting this is his first direct exposure to the horrors of war. But I don't know. The more we're talking about this, I think that I like what Eric is saying here is that Finn is experiencing this reaction. And Jim, your point about his conversation with Jannah in the third film, I think is kind of a slam dunk. He recounts that moment to Jannah in a sense, that he had a similar experience.
Yeah. And that's the Force guiding them. And they never really commit Finn to being Force sensitive, even in The Rise of Skywalker. Everything is just implied. And so remember we had that voicemail last week asking if Finn is going to emerge in a future Star Wars film as a Jedi. Are they going to ever fully commit to that idea? And I hope they do, because the groundwork is all there. It's all been laid out. The only movie where they didn't really hint at it was The Last Jedi. And Rian Johnson clearly did not know what to do with the character of Finn.
No,
among the other things that
goofy
he had
mission.
troubles with. I also realized that Ryan really misinterpreted George's definition of balance of the Force. And it's in The Last Jedi when Rey is connecting with the Force on Ahch-To and Luke is standing there. And she says, what do you sense? And she's like, life and death. And he said, that's the balance. And, light side, dark side. I forget exactly what it was. And he clearly says, balance. That's the balance. And that's not the balance of the Force. I don't know what they were referring to in that moment. But also, I give it the caveat that Luke has disconnected himself from the Force in that moment. So he's like dummy Luke when he's talking to Rey because he's not connected to the Force. He's only talking off of experience. And you have to assume that even as powerful as Luke Skywalker was as a Jedi, his training was not exactly the most comprehensive that a Jedi could receive. He learned in little drips and drabs and really was sort of pushed into becoming a Jedi Knight because the spirits of Obi-Wan and Yoda really felt like he was their only
right.
hope.
And then the poor guy had to make it up. He had to make it up based on the old books and the texts and that he found in Obi-Wan's hut and other texts. And, and he was on a crusade to try and find various Jedi temples and artifacts and things like that. So he was definitely, he had to educate himself. He didn't have anybody to teach him.
As great a Jedi as he was very, his education was lacking.
He was homeschooled.
He was a homeschooled Jedi.
I'm kidding. I know we're going to get all kinds of emails saying my kids are homeschooled. I'm joking. I think it's wonderful if you homeschool your kids. I was just making a funny.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Parents. Whoa. Don't mess with the homeschool parents.
Let's make a definitive statement here on RFR. We are very open to alternative means of education. There's no question about it. There is no question about it.
Right.
So but in this case, he was homeschooled, but his homeschooling only happened once a month, maybe.
Yeah, right.
It was a very loosey-goosey sort of homeschooling going on there. And,
right.
A lot, self-taught, very much self-taught. He's very much a self-taught Jedi. He learned some great stuff from true masters like Obi-Wan Kenobi and Yoda. And now with the rise of the holocron, that offers Jedi from any moment in the timeline to potentially access masterful teachings of the Force from a Jedi perspective.
But it's just not the same, with a lot of that. As having somebody there with you, even if you have these great recordings of, imagine if you had access to, which we have a lot of great thought leaders and stuff, but I mean, if you had recordings of Aristotle and all the great thinkers, it would be wonderful. We have their writings, but it's not the same as if you were in the same room with a Michelangelo or somebody teaching you these types of things. So it's an interesting point about the disadvantage. I love the self-taught Jedi. I mean, I think that's a great name for him.
Yeah, he really is. And Ahsoka too, she walked away from her training. However, she did grow up. Her entire lifestyle was forged by the Jedi from basically from when she was a toddler all the way to when she was a teenager and walked away from the Jedi Order in the middle of the Clone Wars. But so that leaves her with a little bit of an incomplete bit of training as well. And sometimes maybe hard to consider her to be a quintessential Jedi. She does have those holograms from Anakin that she trains with.
Yeah, right.
We saw that. And I like that a lot. But, they turn into reruns after a while. There's only so much you could get from them.
Right. It's kind of like in Superman when he's watching the videos of his dad in the Fortress of Solitude, the crystals. Eventually, he's going to get to the end of those tapes and he's going to have to start back at the beginning. So yeah, it is like reruns.
That's why it's only natural, however, that Star Wars presents us with Ahsoka / Luke Skywalker stories where they're together, maybe trying to educate themselves on the Force together, picking off of what each other learned. I mean, my God, Ahsoka grew up in the temple. She was Anakin Skywalker's Padawan. She also trained under Yoda. Just, this would be madly interesting to Luke. I mean, this would be incredibly interesting, and to hear about a young Obi-Wan and all of that stuff.
Right. I mean, when you think about it, I mean, it's almost like Luke and Ahsoka are like brother and sister in a way. I mean, Ahsoka was somewhat raised by Anakin Skywalker, by her master. And so she got all of the wisdom and the teachings of who would become his father that he did not. So it would be a really interesting conversation. They teased it just ever so slightly in the Book of Boba Fett, where she was like, "Oh, I knew your father," and it was a cool moment. But there's so much more they could tell.
Oh my God. And you can imagine with, Luke Skywalker, younger, he was enthusiastic. He was terribly enthusiastic about learning about the Jedi and being a Jedi and living up to his father's legacy and all of that. Now, granted, at the end, when he finally did meet up with his father and they had a showdown and he was able to bring his father back to the light, and then his father died along with the Empire, that probably would have left Luke Skywalker a little maybe less enthusiastic, a little shaken maybe. A little shaken maybe, which is something that Rian Johnson may have used to build his character of Luke Skywalker, which everyone adamantly opposed and said that that's not the real Luke Skywalker. But I mean, when we really break the character down, he would have to go through, he went through so much trauma in those final few years of the Empire, and he's, as a result of his showdowns with Darth Vader, you'd have to imagine a Luke Skywalker in that moment would have been a little shaken and a little, have the enthusiasm sapped out of him a little bit. But the character of Luke Skywalker would then rise up, and he would educate himself and learn and build a Jedi Order and take in Leia's son, and then he destroys it all, and that shatters Luke Skywalker.
Well, but there's two versions of the moment, the big moment between Luke Skywalker and Ben Solo. That's the other thing about The Last Jedi that I just didn't understand is why the need to show two different perspectives of that moment. Now, I know when you're telling stories in other, less fantasy-filled worlds and things like that the idea of having gray area and multiple perspectives and all that is helpful. But Star Wars, I've always thought, whether it be the prequels or the original trilogy, is much more straightforward than that. It didn't delve into your point of view and that point of view. And yes, I'm aware of Ben's line about the points of view, but that's such a critical moment in the life of both characters that I wish that Rian Johnson had stuck to a definitive telling of that moment. And there's two different versions of it.
I just have a hard time consuming that conflict within Luke without actually seeing what led to it. Other than the broad paint strokes.
Right.
The broad paint strokes that are going on. It's very necessary with a character that's been around since 1977. And fans have definitely accepted the character as is. And then to change him and explain in very broad ways what made him slip is not effective because of the audience's relationship with Luke Skywalker for so long.
Yeah.
It would have been great if we saw it. See, I think the whole thing would have been effective if they told the story in that linear fashion, where
the story of Ben Solo.
Yeah, where you see Luke then dealing with this kid and how it all just fell apart and how he discovered the darkness within Ben Solo.
Right.
And how he was alerted to that and what made it become real to him, real enough to where he had to take action and attempt to kill Ben in his sleep. That's some heavy stuff. And when you just throw it at us in these 30-second flashbacks, it's very jarring. But I don't think it's like a terrible story to tell at all. But we have to see it happen. It can't all happen between the movies because it's so monumental. These are such huge steps to take with the characters that we really need to be walked through it. We can't just be presented it and then, you don't understand. Well, here's a 20-second flashback. Draw your conclusions now, damn it. It's demanding too much from the audience. But that being said, I don't think it's the worst thing to happen to those characters. I love the dramatic turns. I love all of that stuff. But we need to experience it and not just be told about it. And that's where
it's just too much of a leap.
Ultimately,
right. It's just too much of a leap from the Luke that we knew to
without seeing it. I mean, it's not too much of a leap. It's not too much of a leap, but it's just we have to see it. It can't happen off screen. This is too monumental.
Without seeing it,
it's too monumental. Right.
Yeah.
It's too big. We have to be walked through it. Baby steps with things like this, especially with such established characters and established storylines. Because
you're not just killing a boy. You're killing your nephew. You're killing Princess Leia's son. You're killing Han Solo's son. I mean, does it get bigger than that?
See, yeah. So maybe if we were presented with a story that had Luke, an older Jedi, fine, and he's training Han and Leia's son, who may be even a little older than the Kylo Ren we get presented with in the sequel trilogy. That's fine. I mean, Star Wars ages have always been slippery anyway. The way that Ewan McGregor aged from the end of Revenge of the Sith to A New Hope is just amazing. But I mean, we can always, as fans, we can always say, well, you know, the harsh conditions on Tatooine makes people prematurely age and stuff. Fine, I'll roll with that. I'll definitely roll with that. But to change a character so much and then throw it at us with these quick flashbacks it doesn't work with the character. It doesn't work with the character. The actual things that happen do work with the character, but we need to see it. That's all I'm saying. Yep. It's a story that needs to be told. And the Finn story, to take us back full circle, the Finn as a Jedi story is something that was heavily being planted in those seeds were being planted in The Force Awakens. And then more seeds got planted in The Rise of Skywalker. But by then we're at the end of the story. Yeah. So you missed the boat with Finn. So it would be a huge advantage for Lucasfilm to consider bringing John Boyega back for the Daisy Ridley films, whatever they may be, whether it's Sean Levy's or Charmine's, whoever makes the next Rey film. Give John Boyega some dignity and bring his character back. Give Finn the story that was meant to be told for his character. He was meant to be Force sensitive. The Force was awakening in not just Rey, but in Finn as well. And that would have been a great story to tell, to see them both discovering the Force together.
It helps explain how they found each other, that was the will of the Force, bringing them together.
This is the stuff that Luke was trying to do, building a Jedi temple, and Kylo Ren presented this left turn all of a sudden that ruined everything. So let the Force take control of it and present us with a new scenario where you see multiple Jedi emerging, the Force awakening in more than just Daisy Ridley, but John Boyega as well. Finn and Rey.
I suppose Broom Boy might be the only homage that Johnson does pay to the idea of the Force awakening.
Yes. And I thought that was something that was going to be explored more in The Rise of Skywalker, too.
Yeah.
Where all of a sudden lots of Force sensitives are emerging. And it would have been kind of compelling, too, because you would have had light side Force sensitives and dark side Force sensitives. It could have created an entire conflict in itself. Light side versus dark side. Armies get built. Villains emerge as leaders, and heroes rise up to take on the threat of the dark side. That could have been pretty compelling. Really living up to the name The Force Awakens. And then by the end of it all, everyone has the Force. So how do you manage that? How do you manage that?
I got a little bit of Force actually coming on right now, as a matter of fact.
Baby Yoda, I love you!
Rebel Force Radio.
All right. Hey, let's check out the headlines because there's more to say about Daisy Ridley, the Rey film, and all that stuff coming up right now.
I have good news for you, my lord.
That's good news.
Come closer, I have good news.
All right, so comicbook.com has caught up with Daisy Ridley. Look, all the dominoes are falling in place, Jim. You got Nolfi announced as the new writer of the Rey film. A week later, Nolfi's talking about it. We knew it was just a matter of time before Daisy Ridley herself would comment on George Nolfi as the new writer for the Rey film. What's next? Charmin Obaid-Chinoy where's Charmin? No one's seen Charmin Obaid-Chinoy, but I can say that comicbook.com talked to Daisy. She's out on the promotional trail. She's promoting this movie Cleaner that she's in. And so, of course, they're asking her what's going on with the Rey movie. So here's according to Daisy. Daisy says, I have not read the latest script, but I know what's happening and I know the story. I predicted this would be her answer. And I know the story. I think what feels really good is that George is a phenomenal writer. I think we're making sure that it is the story, that this story is the best, the story is the best way. This script is the best way to tell the story. And I think it will be worthwhile for everyone watching it. And I am very excited. Yeah. So that's it. She's excited about George. He's a great writer. And
that takes me aback. That takes me aback right there. I'm sorry. We're talking about Star Wars, and Daisy says George is a great writer. It takes me aback a little bit. It really is. Because, you know the George I'm thinking of. It ain't Nolfi. It ain't Nolfi when I see a quote like that. But then I realize it is Nolfi. It is Nolfi. All right, come on, Jimmy Mack. Accept it. It's been like 13 years. Accept it. George Lucas no longer owns Star Wars. All right.
There's going to be other Georges. There's going to be other times.
There's other Georges. But listen, I was prepared for different filmmakers like Rian Johnson, J.J. Abrams, what have you, Jon Favreau. But was I prepared for other Georges? I don't think I was. This is kind of a come to Jesus moment right now.
Other Georges.
There are other Georges.
I do want to throw out. There's a little bit of editorial in this piece. I just want to throw out because it is interesting to hear other people's takes. This particular, this is Charlie Ridley, who's writing for comicbook.com. It says, it's safe to assume, though, that this will be a true solo story for Rey, who was the lead in the Star Wars sequel trilogy, but basically operated in the nostalgic shadow of Luke and Leia throughout all three movies. With the original characters all now gone, Rey has the ability to really break out on her own and tell and lead an individual story. So, yeah, now that we got all of these icons killed, now the stage is set for Rey. Yeah. Well, let's see what happens. You know, this is going to be Rey's film. When they talk about it being a solo effort, I hope not. I want there to be a great ensemble feel to this. I want her to be surrounded by other great actors and characters. We threw out Finn as a possibility. I hope that they don't just say, well, this is sort of like her version of Solo. It's a Rey story. I want this to continue the story that the ride that we've been on since for the last 10 years, starting with Force Awakens. So I don't think that it's going to be a solo story. I hope not.
That's just the writer
injecting
his own speculation.
Yeah.
And of course, that has run rampant with internet reporting especially in nerd circles such as those we run in. Collider lately, Collider, they're the biggest criminals when it comes to this thing. They put out the headline, "I certainly have been involved. Daisy Ridley reveals her hands-on approach to her new Star Wars movie. Exclusive."
Oh.
All right, Collider, what do you got? Well, here's the quote from Daisy. And, of course, they were part of the junket. She's out promoting this film, Cleaner. Yeah. So they're getting access to her just like everyone else is. So this is hardly an exclusive. This is part of a media junket where we've seen countless numbers of interviews with Daisy Ridley emerge from that media junket. You were not the only people invited to this media junket, Collider. So for you to claim exclusive on something is revealing the fact that you are ignorant of the definition of the word exclusive, and I suggest you look it up right away. But that's not the only thing you're ignorant about, Collider. Collider, they're so in my crosshairs lately right now. She said the headline, again, I'm going to repeat the headline. "I certainly have been involved," Daisy Ridley reveals her hands-on approach to her new Star Wars movie. Here's the quote. "I don't know that I'd be a producer on it, but I certainly have been very involved." Involved in, well, not really involved, but I'm involved in as much as I know what's going on. I know the story. I know what's going on with the script, so I'm aware of that. In other words, Daisy knows exactly what Lucasfilm has told her, and they probably told her this 2 years ago. She has not seen the script. She's not involved in creating the script or the story. I think they're just keeping her in the loop. Maybe that's how you'd put it. Daisy Ridley reveals she's in the loop as far as what's going on with the new Star Wars movie, but she hasn't read the script from George Nolfi yet. That should be your headline, Collider. Not, "I've certainly been very involved." Hands-on approach. Come on. Who are you kidding here? This is such crap.
That's a funny headline, considering that she corrects herself in the actual quote. So the headline is, "I certainly have been very involved. And then, of course, buried down here as well, not very involved, but I'm involved.
I'm not involved. I mean,
I have involvement.
Not the dictionary definition of involved. Okay?
Yeah. That depends on your definition of involved.
But they told me they're working on a Rey movie, okay? Come on. God. And then a bunch of people react to this because Collider has decent reach. And so people just see the headlines and they're like, "Oh, this Star Wars film is so healthy right now," despite going through 3 writers, despite being announced 2 years ago and having no forward progression on the production whatsoever.
No, and you could go further and say that they had to bastardize to some degree the best thing that they had going. They had to sort of grab what would have been Mandalorian Season 4 and get that onto the big screen. Kind of sacrificing, the one thing they really had that was bringing in audiences on the Disney Plus platform. So they're kind of cannibalizing themselves to save not just this film, but others that will come after it.
Well, they have prioritized the hell out of Daisy Ridley's Rey, which I hope Daisy Ridley's agents are paying close attention to, because when it comes time to negotiate her salary for this film, they should ask for the world, the moon, and the entire solar system.
Because she could bring the whole thing down, eh? She could bring the whole thing tumbling down.
Well, do you have a Rey without Daisy Ridley? No.
No, I don't think so.
You can't recast Rey. I believe that. You cannot recast Rey. And why would you? So they have a strong negotiation chip, and they should definitely use it, because Lucasfilm has made it clear that they consider Rey the most valuable asset moving forward.
The most valuable.
They certainly, because they've killed off all the other most valuable ones. kill them all off. And I mean, this is the Disney Lucasfilm Star Wars. Rey is essentially the embodiment of that. And they have done a lot to invest in her character. And I'll be honest, I really like the character, and I like Daisy Ridley a lot. So I want to see where this is going. I'm not trying to crap on it, but I'm also very interested in crapping all over this awful reporting from Collider, who does this kind of stuff time and time again. The worst interviewers, the worst editors, the worst website is Collider. And it's really got fandom wrapped around its little finger, it appears. Because whatever they say is holier than thou. But their reporting sucks. And it's so manipulative that it makes me want to puke.
Well, I'm glad you saw that Collider piece because that's just sort of the icing on the cake here with this. She also does say in this same interview, so it sounds like, as you were saying, Jim, this isn't an exclusive for anybody. It was a junket style thing. They're all shouting out questions because even in this Collider piece, they're actually quoting her response to what comicbook.com had sort of implied was their question to Daisy Ridley, their exclusive question. They don't use that word, but it's sort of implied.
Oh, everyone's got exclusives. It's like exclusive. Oprah's here. You get an exclusive. You get an exclusive. You get it. But Oprah, that really doesn't work within the realms of the definition of the word exclusive. No. It's okay. You get an exclusive. Everyone exclusive.
How about this for an exclusive? Something else that she said at the same junket was that she'd be open to joining and participating in other franchises. She says, I'm open to loads of stuff. Because someone asked a question about, because I guess she has a relationship with the AD who's working on the new Avengers movie, this Matthew Sharp. And she says, I work with this amazing second AD, Matthew Sharp. He texts me because he's doing the Avengers. And he goes, if they call. So I was like, if they call, absolutely. Then, of course, I love the Batman. I love the Penguin. I'm a fan of so many sorts of films. I'm open to everything. Well, she's playing it smart. Of course. Why would you ever close yourself off? So, hey, if you're listening out there in the DC universe or in the Marvel, Daisy Ridley, whose film was at one time being fast-tracked, is now saying, give me a call. I'm open. My date book's open. I don't know when this Rey movie's going to be made.
So, yeah, she's open to all kind of franchises. Fast and the Furious with Daisy Ridley behind the wheel. Why not?
I love it. Move over, Vin Diesel. Okay, speaking of lots of other franchises, we've got a franchise veteran we've been covering. She's going to be in the Mandalorian and Grogu movie, Sigourney Weaver. Who doesn't love Sigourney Weaver? She's delightful. And she's talking a little bit more about her involvement in the Mandalorian and Grogu, calling Grogu, Jim, a badass. That's what she says. She says, I get to have scenes with a little Grogu, which is probably why I did the movie. She's talking to Games Radar. And she said, he's a little badass too. It's going to be wonderful for people to see what Grogu is up to now, because he's grown up a little bit and capable of so much more than maybe we think just watching the series. So that's the first thing that she lays on, is Grogu capable of more. Our own Kyle Newman in the Jedi Council has been saying that he needs to see more out of Grogu. It's like, let the little guy grow up. We need to see more of him. He needs to be more than cute. He needs to bring the goods. So maybe that's what's happening here. I don't know what kind of a time gap. I don't assume this is going to be more than 5 years tops between the end of season 3 and this film. I think there will be some gap. We've got Carl Weathers. I think they're going to have to deal with him no longer being in Mando's life. And also, so they can do what Sigourney's talking about here, which is give us reason, give the writers reason to move Grogu on a little bit. So he's going to have to maybe pull a little more weight in this story.
He's going to be older. He's going to have facial hair.
Oh, no, we can't do that.
Yeah,
He's
going to be like, he's going to be going through his goth period. It's going to be a goth Grogu. Yeah, he's going to have like black fingernails and stuff like that. It's interesting though to consider an evolution of the Grogu character, because you might be stripping some Baby Yoda out of the Grogu. Is what I'm saying. And really Grogu is his appeal is all about the Baby Yoda aspect.
The cuteness, right? The cute factor.
Yeah. And so, I mean, even old Yoda at 900 years old was still relatively cute, I would say.
He was cute. But what about gangly teenage Grogu? I mean, do we want to see that? You know, just big feet, big hands, awkward. His voice is cracking. You know, he's got some pimples. I don't know that we want to see that.
I was just going to say, what about the acne? What about the acne? I don't want to see a Star Wars character applying Clear Cell right in the middle of the film. But she is indicating, though, that we may be seeing changes. Yeah. Let's just say we might be noting changes with good old Grogu.
How did Peter Brady sing that? Changes.
Yeah. Sha-na-na-na-na-na-na-na. Sha-na-na-na-na. Yeah, he'll go through that. They'll do a music video. The whole shebang.
Jim, do you think we're gonna get a time gap of say 5 years in the timeline between the end of season 3 and this Mandalorian and Grogu film?
All right, well, the last episode of The Mandalorian aired in 2023, and the film is going to launch in 2026.
Right.
What kind of time gap can we consider here? Will it be like in real time, 3 to 5 years?
Yeah.
Will there be no time gap, and all of a sudden he's just sort of come out of his shell a little bit and matured, Baby Yoda, Grogu? That's interesting. If they're going to indicate any sort of separation via time from the end of season 3 to the beginning of this film.
Right.
Not sure. That's a good question. I think they're going to, if they are, it's going to be downplayed. It'll be minimal.
Yeah.
At best. Yeah, 5 years at best.
Right. He's capable of much more than maybe what we think of just watching the series, says Sigourney Weaver. And if he is capable of a lot more, and if there is a 3 to 5 year time jump, what are we going to assume is responsible for his training? Are we talking this is what Mando is putting him through? Does he hook up with it? I mean, I'm assuming that his days of training as a Jedi are over. He rejected that path.
Well, maybe we see him mature within the context of the film itself. Maybe he starts in point A and then he ends up in point B by the end of the film. Maybe we actually see the emergence of him being a badass, as Sigourney Weaver says.
Right. She does have another quote to your point about seeing growth in the actual storyline. This is a pretty decent clue. She says, "I play a wonderful character who is, in a position of authority." We know she plays an officer with the New Republic, and she says, "And I have to send the Mandalorian out on a mission on the Outer Rim where all the bad stuff happens." So I'm getting a sense, Jim, that this is the old retired bounty hunter gets called back into service. There's no one else they can trust. There's no one else they can call to do this. So they call Mando. And so, kind of like, James Bond gets called back into service in the last James Bond after he's been retired for a few years. Thus, Mando, who last we saw him it looked like he was settling down in that little house there.
He was, but before he started settling down, he had a meetup at a New Republic base with Carson Teva.
Yeah.
And he said to Teva that he was hanging up the bounty hunter hat. He was done with bounty hunting. But he did make it clear, hey, if the New Republic ever needs me, you know how to get a hold of me. He does say that.
Yeah.
So it appears they will take him up on that offer. And here's where you might see some elements of the abandoned Rangers of the New Republic show getting introduced into the Mandalorian storyline. So that's what I think is happening. Whatever they had devised for Cara Dune to do in the Rangers of the New Republic show will now be a mission for the Mandalorian and Baby Yoda.
Yeah.
That's my prediction. Because if you do watch the end of the season 3 finale, for the Mandalorian, you'll notice that there is that moment where Mando has that conversation with Carson Teva. And you see Dave Filoni in the background wearing an X-Wing pilot uniform and his cowboy hat, which is the only time you see that combo. And I took note of that.
We do
the
have
Filonization of Star Wars.
We do have one more quick quote here from Sigourney, because if you're questioning, why Sigourney Weaver? You know, is she a Star Wars fan? And she says, I admire Star Wars, but I don't sit around wishing I was in another franchise because I've been so lucky to be in some wonderful ones. But at the time when I was offered it, I was delighted. I'm a great fan of Jon Favreau, and I was already a great fan of The Mandalorian. So Sigourney, you know, probably streaming it on the Disney Plus in the Weaver household.
There you go.
There you go.
I mean, Mandalorian is relatively inescapable for anyone who follows any sort of pop culture or Hollywood productions, which I'm sure Sigourney Weaver does. And so she has at least a fair amount of familiarity with it. She was a big fan of The Mandalorian, so bring her on board. She's Sigourney Weaver, for crying out loud. We're taking from, you talk about Daisy Ridley making herself available to other franchises. Here we have the queen of both Ghostbusters and Aliens joining Star Wars. So, we got one of yours. What do you think of that? Other franchises?
You look right. I mean, you look at your Alec Guinness and your Peter Cushing and your Sam Jackson and your Liam Neesons. There is a history of kind of plucking. There's been a lot of unknowns and lesser knowns in Star Wars, but they sort of anchor it here and there with some of these heavyweights. And Jim, something we noticed throughout the Skeleton Crew is we kind of started coming around to this idea that maybe Star Wars does need a little more star power than it did back in the day. And we got to be open to that. And I'm really talking to myself here because I've struggled with people I don't want to see Tom Cruise in Star Wars. When they become so big, it's hard for me to buy them in something else. But sprinkled here and there, a little bit of star power and some recognizability is not a bad thing.
I think it all depends on the actor that they're bringing on board and the actor's ability to get lost within the character. And I noted that with Jude Law playing Jod Narwood. I noted that with Liam Neeson playing Qui-Gon Jinn. But when it comes to other actors like Jack Black and even Tim Meadows, who I love, but I mean, he stuck out like a sore thumb in season 3 of The Mandalorian. He really, really did.
He really did in such a vanilla role, but he was just Tim Meadowsing all over it. He was just Tim Meadowsing all, yeah.
Listen, I can accept Tim Meadows in Star Wars, but when he pulled out the bottle of Courvoisier, I was like, forget about it. What are we doing here? Why is that New Republic? Yes. Why is that New Republic officer drinking Courvoisier? This makes no sense at all. None whatsoever. But I do love Tim, and just to insert him because he's very. I consider him to be someone who's instantly recognizable.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like he's an A-list celebrity or anything,
right.
But he certainly has carved out his own niche within pop culture as far as being Saturday Night Live and The Ladies' Man.
Right. I mean, he was a long-time cast member on SNL. It wasn't just a couple of years. He was like the Kenan of his day. Not quite Kenan levels, but he was on for quite a while.
And you don't traditionally see him outside of comedic roles.
Yeah, right.
I don't think you ever see him outside of comedic roles. So to drop him into The Mandalorian playing a New Republic officer who really has nothing to do, has no impact on the story, you could have cast anyone in that role that he appeared in. I believe it was that episode that featured Dr. Pershing,
right,
and that other one, and it was just like a throwaway role. You could have put anyone in there. To put somebody as recognizable as Tim Meadows in there it doesn't work, because he doesn't have enough of a character to lose himself in. Here's a good example: frickin' Urkel. He worked out great in Skeleton Crew. He lost himself in the role, and sure, he had the benefit of the facial prosthetics and
a little bit
gizmos and doodads.
But if you're looking for Urkel, you're going to see Urkel.
If you want to see Urkel,
if you want to see
it,
but that's what I'm saying. I'm saying,
but it wasn't.
Jaleel wasn't completely disguised, even though he had a little bit of prosthetics. But I mean, his face is there, but he played a completely different role.
And he became the character.
Yeah.
If Urkel played the role that Tim Meadows played in Mandalorian Season 3, we'd be having the same conversation that we just had about Tim Meadows, except we'd be talking about Urkel, Jaleel White. Why'd they put Urkel in that scene? It makes no sense, because there's not enough time for the actor to lose himself in the character and for us as an audience to not see that actor, to only see the character. That's where the true success comes from. And that's what I think Jaleel White succeeded at in Skeleton Crew, is I wasn't just seeing Jaleel White every time he popped on screen. I got accustomed to his character, and I got accustomed to him playing that role. And so he just became another Star Wars character. He wasn't Urkel anymore.
No, and he wasn't.
In a position. I think that's
just
exactly what Jaleel White was trying to do, was not be Urkel anymore. I think he's been trying to do that since Urkel.
Yeah, but in the case of Jack Black, Jack was just, like I said with Tim Meadows, he was just Jack Blacking all over the set there. All right, hey, here's some really interesting news. This is good news. We've got a little bit of a shakeup going on within Lucasfilm Creative. And Jim, this is something that we sort of tipped folks off about a few weeks ago, but now it is official. Derek Hoffman, the new vice president of development at Lucasfilm, he is going to lead the team that develops stories for adaptation in live action. So this is big, and he steps into the shoes of outgoing Rain Roberts. She's moved on to greener pastures. What do you make of this big change? Because I think this is a real big change.
Oh, this is a big one. Rain has been in her role as vice president of development and story group member, and she served as producer of The Acolyte, and she's been with Lucasfilm ever since Kathy Kennedy came over to the company. Rain came over with Kathy. She was working in Kathy's office when Kathy then moved over to Lucasfilm. And the reason I know this is because Rain Roberts herself told me this. The one and only time I met her at Star Wars Celebration 2015, when me and Jason were hosts of the behind-the-scenes stage, and Rain was part of a panel that Dave Filoni ran about the women at Lucasfilm. So we got to hang out with Rain and Carrie Beck and Athena Portillo and Amy Beth Christensen, and they were all great. I mean, I loved all of them. I thought Rain was absolutely awesome when I talked to her. But it appears that she has moved on. She's moved over to Fox Searchlight, and filling her role now as vice president of live action development is Derek Hoffman. And Derek has had a career, a very successful career in all sort of different mediums, from film to comics, etc. And he is someone who worked as an executive on some X-Men films, and specifically a guy who has collaborated with Simon Kinberg in the past. And we know Simon Kinberg is currently working on a trilogy of films for Star Wars. So we had teased this news a few weeks back on RFR. I think it was the first show of the year we did, where we had one of our men on the inside feeding us information about Derek arriving at Lucasfilm. And we had heard, we got some misinformation, though. We heard that he was replacing Carrie Beck, who is another vice president of development and live action at Lucasfilm. And I thought that sounded weird because I know Dave Filoni has always been pretty fond of Carrie Beck, and I know he likes working with her. So when it was announced that Rain Roberts had moved on to Fox Searchlight and Derek Kaufman was moving into Lucasfilm, that all made much more sense to me because, and here's the harsh reality of show business, when there is a flop, the studio always looks for a scapegoat. And it's happened time and time again at Lucasfilm. When The Last Jedi delivered all of that negative criticism from the fan base and beyond, there was a fall guy, and that was Carrie Hart. And then when The Rise of Skywalker, despite its box office success, developed a lot of animosity among critics and fans, Michelle Rejwan eventually paid the price. But I think the thing that took her down really was that Willow series. So she then had moved on.
So we have to sacrifice someone to the Star Wars gods when
there's always a sacrificial lamb.
Yeah.
And in the case of The Acolyte, Rain Roberts was a producer on that show. In May, Rain was talking about being excited for Acolyte Season 2. You can find interviews. Just Google Rain Roberts Acolyte, and you will find interviews with her talking about Season 2 in May and June of 2024. But by December 2024, she had moved on to Fox Searchlight. Coincidence? I don't think so. The whole thing is The Acolyte did not perform as well as they wanted to, and Rain Roberts is the scapegoat. And she's a wonderful person, but that's just the harshness of how mainstream Hollywood show business works, especially on the scale of Star Wars. There's always someone to take the hit. As long as it's not Kathy Kennedy, then that's how things will be. And that's what happens here. So Rain has moved on to Fox Searchlight, and we have Derek Kaufman moving in to Lucasfilm, and Derek has worked on films and video games.
He worked with Richard Donner.
Books.
Talk about iconic.
He's from the Donner, yeah.
Through the Donner production company. And we hear from the inside that he's good people. So
yeah, right, yeah. Definitely someone who understands Star Wars, understands the genre. And at Lucasfilm, he's going to help leading the team that develops all the stories for adaptation to live action. So fingers crossed, I think we got a good one in there. I don't think Rain had any experience coming into Star Wars. And she got elevated into a position that may have been, she may have been over her skis a little bit. And I felt that way for a very long time. And I think there's been a lot of producers at Lucasfilm who have been elevated to these executive level positions that didn't really have the reinforcement on their resumes to back up these positions of power they were holding, guiding Star Wars. So Derek Kaufman is definitely a guy who does have that resume, and he is a guy who's worked with Simon Kinberg, longtime collaborator. And I would not diminish the importance of Simon Kinberg's arrival at Lucasfilm coinciding with Derek Kaufman's arrival as VP of Development of Live Action. So fingers crossed this will be a good move, and a move that will result in more consistent feature film releases and maybe a tighter focus on the streaming series.
Yeah, I don't want to read too much into this, but if you look on the Lucasfilm website and you look at the pages that are for each one of the executives, they all have sort of a hero image that rides at the top of the page. And for Derek, I don't know if they got a choice in this stuff or not. I mean, like if you look at Dave's, it's a picture of Dave with Rosario Dawson on the set of Ahsoka. And for Derek, it's a picture of a page from the Empire Strikes Back script from the scene where right after Luke leaves Dagobah and there's just Ben there and Yoda and they're discussing the situation that they're in. And Ben says, "That boy is our last hope." And Yoda says, "No, there is another." And this hero image has "that boy is our last hope" marked right there. So maybe a little bit of foreshadowing for the impact that Derek Hoffman may have on Star Wars.
Or it could be something that gives us a hint as to what Simon is working on, Simon Kinberg, as far as his trilogy goes. Ben Kenobi says, "That boy is our only hope." And Yoda says, "No." And "no" is circled. So that means that Luke is not the last hope, and that Simon Kinberg and Derek Hoffman have something up their sleeves that may be quite impressive as far as the next level of Star Wars storytelling beyond Luke Skywalker and the Skywalker family. So that's what a lot of people seem to want. I always see articles online saying, Star Wars' biggest problem is its nostalgia. Star Wars' biggest problem is its reliance on Luke Skywalker, yada, yada, yada. So we just need someone to crack the code and prove to us that Luke Skywalker isn't our last hope, that there is another. We need that proof.
You love Star Wars.
Rebel Force Radio.
We've got a story coming up about the future of Luke Skywalker. But before we do, let's talk a little bit about this future of Star Wars animation. There are rumors about what might be happening because it's been awfully quiet, Jim, on the front of Star Wars animation since The Bad Batch wrapped up.
All right. RFR exclusive. I can say this because no one's been reporting this. But the people we know have been telling us that, yes, there is a new series coming from the same crew that produced Rebels, and it's been given the green light recently, very recently, that a new animated series coming from the Lucasfilm animation crew has been given the green light. And on top of that, we heard this crazy news, which I'm still trying to decipher. We heard an additional series has also been under production. Our source has seen artwork, and this could be most likely an animated series, an anime series, and it could be an extension of the Ronin Jedi story from Star Wars Visions Volume 1, the very first short presented to us in Star Wars Visions. Maybe. The skepticism I have about this information that was fed to us was that Star Wars Visions Volume 3 is coming this year. And we heard it's going to be all anime once again. So it almost makes sense that there'll be another Jedi Ronin story told within that mix. But we were told, no. This is going to be its own series. A Star Wars anime Jedi Ronin series. So we're holding out hope. We're thinking announcements might happen at the big Japanese convention happening in a couple of months in April. So that could be the case.
Well, there's already been a novelization about this character, right? Wasn't there a novel?
There has been.
Yeah.
And occasional Marvel comics featuring just one-offs featuring the Jedi Ronin. But again, we haven't seen Star Wars Visions Volume 3, and we know that's coming. So something tells me that maybe we're just being told information about something that's already been announced. But we were told, no, this is going to be its own series, an anime Star Wars series about the Jedi Ronin.
Well, Star Wars
or
Celebration
very much
Japan,
in this style.
Yeah. I mean, what you couldn't pick a more appropriate venue to announce something like this.
Exactly. So that might be the next big deal. Also, we've heard that there'll be news about the next Star Wars video game featuring Cal Kestis and the Jedi Fallen Order / Jedi Survivor series, and that will be hitting us this April in Japan as well. So we'll be following all that closely, and we'll talk about it all. But everything we just told you about the animation series and et cetera, I think that's all RFR exclusive. I haven't seen anybody reporting this online up to this point. So
no, I haven't seen it.
Feel free to run with it. Feel free to say RFR says that this is happening. But I mean, we don't make things up, and we just, we don't say things we think are going to happen. We only say them when somebody who's in the know tells us, and it's somebody we trust. So that's just what we heard, and I'm just passing it on.
Hey, real quick, I just wanted to mention, we're coming off of Super Bowl weekend, and I'm sure my family, like so many others, were all obviously gathered around the TV watching the Super Bowl. And it was, the ads. And, it's also, in addition just to the TV commercials, there's a lot of movie trailers that traditionally get dropped. I think this year, the big one was we got to see that first glimpse of the new Jurassic Park movie. And there wasn't a whole lot that, jumped out at me. I was kind of thinking that we might see an Andor season 2. I thought maybe there'd be an ad for that. But when you consider the cost of these commercials and you consider the cost of what Andor has cost Disney, that's a pretty tall order. But there was one little Star Wars, moment, if you can call it that, in the Super Bowl. And that was my personal favorite ad, the ad for Jeep that featured Harrison Ford. I love the ad. Thought the sentiment of it was great. The idea of coming together despite differences. And, of all the people that could sort of bring us together, one thing that we can all agree on is that Harrison Ford is an absolute treasure and maybe the last true movie star in that traditional sense of the term. And so it was great seeing him. And I love the ad. And it made me want to go buy a Jeep. Got to be honest.
I've heard so many people say this. The power of suggestion when it comes from Harrison Ford is overwhelming. People are lining up outside Jeep dealerships countrywide. But, it does tie into Star Wars in a pretty huge way. Beyond it just being Han Solo, we learned that James Mangold, future Star Wars director, fingers crossed, of the Dawn of the Jedi film, is the guy who directed this commercial. So
really?
James working, James once again working with Harrison Ford, reuniting. This is the guy who directed, of course, the last Indiana Jones film, Dial of Destiny, and he and Harrison are back to bring us advertising news about Jeep. But it just when the ad hit at just such a good time. I think it was fourth quarter, and it just felt right. And it was a long spot, like 2 minutes long.
Yeah.
Which meant Jeep spent $16 million just to get it on the air, and that doesn't even count what Harrison Ford's payday was for this thing, which
or
he probably
Mangold's.
made a couple million, or Mangold, right? So no cost was spared. The best observation I heard of this commercial came to you and me via text within minutes of it airing from Kyle Newman, who said, "Take note of the dog riding shotgun in the Jeep with Harrison Ford. Furry co-pilot, ring any bells?" So we all know that George Lucas was inspired by his own dog riding shotgun with him as he tooled around Northern California, coming up with ideas for Star Wars. And that's how he thought the idea of a furry co-pilot would work, just from driving around with his dog, big furry Malamute named Indiana. Ring any bells? So it was a great one. And of course, the best line was at the end of the commercial.
My friends, my family, my work make me happy. This Jeep makes me happy, even though my name is...
Yeah. I just thought that was the best line of the entire spot. So great to see Harrison Ford. He's everywhere as we are on the dawn of this new Captain America film, Brave New World, hitting theaters. I think this
is it this
week
weekend?
Or next week?
Yeah, soon.
I think it is this week. I think it might be seeing a Valentine's Day release for the new Captain America film. And from what I've seen of it, it looks like this might be a return to form for Marvel. A Captain America film without Chris Evans.
Yeah.
It's it's a bold step to take, but they seem to have a lot of faith in it. I didn't watch any of the Captain America streaming series, so I hope I'm not completely lost with this film, but I do plan on seeing it in the theaters, and I am looking forward to most notably seeing Harrison Ford turn into the Red Hulk. So yes, that's hitting theaters tonight as this podcast drops, February 14th, Valentine's Day. Take your lover to go see the Red Hulk. In red is kind of a Valentine's Day color, I would definitely say.
And he has pink nipples.
It's very well, who doesn't?
I know a few.
My nipples are pink. Smash.
All right. By the way, also, it was funny. Somebody caught up with Harrison Ford doing one of these junkets, and of course, wanted to get his thoughts on Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. And, of course, they're going up to him and saying, it didn't do all that well. And Harrison's quote was, we'll have to bleep this. Let me see if I can get this here. I'm going to do this authentically. He says, well, happens.
Yeah, it does. It does. And he also says he doesn't second guess his participation in that film whatsoever. And he's glad he made it. Right. Because let's face it, folks, that probably is the last action-adventure film for Harrison Ford. I don't know what's going to happen in this Captain America film, but I anticipate a lot of the action the character goes through is in the CGI animated Red Hulk,
right?
Sort of, which is not Harrison Ford.
No, I don't.
So, yeah.
Got something really fun coming up, folks. We love these vintage moments with the original cast of the Star Wars films. That's going to be coming up in just a moment. We've got something really special. So if you've enjoyed those lost radio interviews and things, that's coming up here in just a minute. But before we get there, I do want to talk about this because I think it's very, very timely and important. So check this out. So this was a video that was posted by the official Disney parks social channels. This was on Instagram. A very familiar black robed figure approaching the Millennium Falcon. They're at Galaxy's Edge. Black glove reaches out from the robes as R2-D2 rolls up next to him. It can only be one character, and that is Luke Skywalker. So the story is Luke Skywalker coming to Galaxy's Edge to debut sometime during the Season of the Force event at Disneyland, somewhere between March 28th and May 11th, and then will also feature in the Disneyland After Dark, and that is Star Wars Night. These dates also coming up April 8th through May 6th. These are apparently extra tickets are necessary in order to get in there. But the bottom line is, regardless of how you see him, the fact is that Luke Skywalker is coming to Galaxy's Edge. He'll be the very first original trilogy character to make an appearance at the park.
Wrong.
Oh, Chewbacca.
Incorrect.
Chewbacca.
Yeah, there
Chewbacca.
you go.
Okay, yeah. Chewbacca.
You know, Chewie, everyone hugs Chewie when they see him at Galaxy's Edge. And so when it comes my turn to finally hug Chewie, which I've never done, but I'm going to be prepared for it when it happens. Since so many people are pressing their sweaty flesh up against Chewbacca all day long, right before I go in to hug Chewie, I'm going to give him a little spritz of Febreze before the hug. Do you think that would be, is that appropriate? Should I do something like that?
Maybe shoot some of that poof stuff that you see advertised. You know, it takes the smell of skunks even out of your dog.
Chewie might need that too, depending on how often they wash those. What am I saying? That's the real Chewbacca. I should say how often Chewie showers is what I'm trying to say.
Well,
I don't think it's very often.
All right, so what is this? Does this symbolize a change? Yeah, there's been changes. Mandalorian and Grogu showed up to Galaxy's Edge, but you know, it tells me, Jim, that I think they've completely abandoned this idea of the chronology, the continuity with Galaxy's Edge and Batuu. This is now a place where it's Star Wars, whatever era you want. It's very Star Warsy in its feel. But at the same time, you can see a Rey, and you can see a Chewie, and you can see a Luke Skywalker. You can see a Baby Yoda hanging out with Mando. And I think that is absolutely, yes, what it should be and should have always been.
Should have always been. But I understand the mental approach to this. Galaxy's Edge opened up to the public in 2019. The sequel films were still very much in everyone's crosshairs or spotlights. Everyone was paying very close attention to the sequel trilogy. So as a means of promoting those films, present fans with the opportunity to go to that era of Star Wars. As it's rolling out in the theaters, maintain the integrity of it within Galaxy's Edge. Do I think that's the right approach to take for the entire park? Probably not. I think they should have been banking on a little bit more of the real icons of the Star Wars IP. And that would be environments like Dagobah and Hoth and the Death Star and Tatooine, of course, Tatooine. And Galaxy's Edge does a great job of presenting us sort of like a boiled down version of all the Star Wars environments into one.
There's a familiarity to it.
Yeah.
Feels familiar.
I mean, you know it right away.
Yeah.
Even if it's a brand new planet you never heard of, it's populated with only sequel era characters or whatever, it still just reeks of Star Wars. The aesthetic is so awesomely preserved in that park. But why limit it to just the sequel trilogy era when you have so many bankable and recognizable icons populating the entire Star Wars universe? Drop them in so people can have the opportunity to meet them all. Chewie is easily the most popular character at Galaxy's Edge.
Yeah.
And has been since day one.
Right.
And then you have the recognizable, the stormtroopers. Yes, they are First Order stormtroopers, but they still maintain the integrity and aesthetic of all stormtroopers. There's been so many stormtrooper variations over the years that as long as they maintain the integrity of all the variations, that's all that matters. And the sequel trilogy era stuff definitely does. Kylo Ren is a character you see walking around there all the time. Rey. But recently they've introduced the Mandalorian and Grogu. Also, I do have to say, beyond Chewbacca, we do see good old R2-D2 rolling around Galaxy's Edge as well.
Yeah.
So there is another original trilogy character there, and I was with you at Galaxy's Edge eating lunch one day when R2 rolled up, and always a thrill.
Yeah,
I mean, really,
yeah,
you could bring out Pedro Pascal and Adam Driver, even Mark Hamill, but when you bring out R2, that's a whole different thing because that's R2,
right?
All right, he's not playing a character. That is R2. He's as legitimate of an R2 as the R2s you see on the screen in the Star Wars films. R2 forever. Hashtag it. So that'll be our newest hashtag, R2 forever. We'll be making the most obvious statement you can make in Star Wars, R2 forever. But adding Luke Skywalker, it doesn't necessarily violate, well, I guess it does. If they wanted to present Galaxy's Edge is strictly a time capsule that happens between The Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker, which is how it's designed. But now they're opening it up a little bit more. So if you're going to put a Luke Skywalker there, he should be grumpy old bearded Luke, Mark Hamill Luke, that we see in The Rise of Skywalker. But they're presenting us more with a Return of the Jedi looking Luke now.
Right.
So this
is Luke from Mando. This is the Luke that shows up and takes Grogu.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
That's what I thought. So they have to Disneyfy it, no matter what. They have to Disneyfy it.
Yeah, they do.
It has to be
That's
that
their
Luke.
Yeah, their Luke.
Which is kind of like the Return of the Jedi Luke, but better. But in the eyes of Disney.
I do love the fact that you do have all these people, as you were talking about earlier about, we got to get rid of the Skywalker story. We got to, kill the past, as Kylo Ren called it. And when Galaxy's Edge is and the whole Disney parks are falling on hard times, who do they look to? Who do they look to add a little life to the party? Luke Skywalker. And that's because they know. Come on.
The market research is done. Let's just we're done with this kind of like feeling around in the dark period of Disney Star Wars. All right? Can we be done with that?
Let's please.
Don't you guys know what the fans love and what the fans expect and what the fans want? They want Luke. They want original trilogy. And I see, I hear myself say that. I'm like, well, how far can we go with it? Well, let's go as far as we can with it. I mean, really, we're talking about an amusement park here.
Right.
All right? So if they're going to present us with an immersive experience, do it with the Star Wars that has existed from the beginning. And the one that really made Star Wars what it is today. This is an amusement park, okay? Just give the people what they want to see. It shouldn't be a specifically updated version of it. They should just barf Star Wars all over the place and not be so picky about it. Throw out some Greedos. Where's the Greedo representation here? I see none. One thing I've known about Star Wars since 1977 is that no matter where you go in the galaxy, there's going to be a Greedo there somewhere. Put some Greedos in there. Let's own this. We have to own this. Put Darth Vader in Galaxy's Edge. Put Boba Fett in. Well, they have brought Boba Fett in, but he's the Disney
Boba.
Mandalorian version.
Yeah.
He's the Disney Boba. And I don't crap on the Disney version of Boba. I kind of like it with the black. He's in black, kind of representing his Tatooine experience and then reclaiming his status as the galaxy's most feared bounty hunter, and blend the two together. I like that. That's a cool version of Boba Fett. But, give us some of those original, throw a Lando in there. Could you imagine if Lando and Lobot went walking down the middle of Galaxy's Edge in front of the Millennium Falcon? People would go nuts.
Have Lando in the cantina.
Have
Lando in the cantina. And if you really want to Disneyfy it, fine. Have Lando in the corner of the cantina playing sabacc. And you could saddle up there and play a hand or two of sabacc with Lando.
You can make reservations to play cards with Lando Calrissian Do you realize what a huge success something like that would be? Do we have to think of everything for you? You're this multi-bajillion-dollar company, international. And two schmucks in a Star Wars podcast are outthinking you.
Because we're not overthinking it.
Well, that's just it. We're not overthinking it, and we're fueled by our passion and our knowledge of Star Wars. Unfiltered. Yeah. There's no focus groups here. We are the focus group. Damn it. Focus on us and listen to what we're telling you. This is the no-brainer guide to successful Disney Star Wars, being presented every week here on Rebel Force Radio. And while we love and appreciate you, Disney Company, for all the Star Wars you've provided us, especially over this last 10 years, it's been pretty damn intense. And we're on board for so much more. But just call us and we'll help you make it better.
All right, I've been waiting for this the whole show. I'm really excited for this because I love these buried treasure audio moments. In fact, Jim, you brought us one. It wasn't an audio moment. I guess depending on how you listen to this podcast, that vintage TV interview that you brought us a couple of weeks ago with the cast of the original Star Wars film, and they were promoting the original Star Wars film. We also had the WGN radio interviews that were
find. That was a find.
That was an absolute find. Yeah.
We'll call that a find.
So it's been a lot of fun going, and these are some of my favorite moments on the show in recent time. You got something new that came across your desk. This time we're looking at the promotional trail of The Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah, this is really interesting. This is a moment in time, 1980. It's relatively newly discovered. This 1980 press conference, official press conference for Empire Strikes Back. And this recording has an interesting backstory. I want to thank loyal RFR listener Chris for presenting this to us and turning us onto it. And you can find the full interviews on YouTube now. But for the longest time, these recordings sat in some journalist's closet. And about 7 years ago, they were made available on eBay. And through my research, I haven't really been able to figure out who bought them or how much was paid for them. But I know the original asking price was significant based on some of the stuff I've seen in chat rooms and forums from back in the day via my research. I'm not done researching this because there's so much of it, too, that it's going to take more than one episode of RFR to play you some of these highlights. But so what happened was the journalist who recorded this press conference sold the recordings on eBay, and somebody bought them and put them up on YouTube. And,
that's great. So whoever bought them, they spent the money, and they're like, I'm going to share this with my fellow fans. Wow. That's great.
They were sold about 7 years ago, and about 2 years ago, I presume it is the buyer place them on YouTube. So I'm still researching this. I'm still trying to figure it out. But this is a very interesting press conference featuring Harrison Ford, Carrie Fisher, Mark Hamill, Dave Prowse, Anthony Daniels, Billy D. Williams, director Irwin Kershner, and producer Gary Kurtz. And it's your typical press conference where reporters take turns asking questions of the cast and crew as they sit up behind a table with microphones in front of a group of reporters. And then at the end of maybe half an hour or so of answering various questions, the actors and crew would split off and go sit at tables. And the journalists would circulate throughout the room and like rotate around and talk to each talent via junket style. And so they would have time to ask these questions. So the guy who reported this not only recorded the full press conference, but also recorded his one-on-one interviews with the cast and crew. And so for this episode of RFR, we're just going to play you some of the highlights I pulled from the actual press conference itself, featuring all the actors in the crew and all the reporters shouting out questions at them. And the first clip, what I look for, so many people love when we feature vintage Star Wars interview audio on RFR. Like you were saying, Jason, they all loved it when we were playing the clips from the Lee Phillips show in Chicago with Star Trek fans asking questions of the cast, or that great reel-to-reel tape that we discovered at WGN Radio from 1977. Well, this press conference features similar candid, off-the-cuff conversation and moments, and also captures the moment. Again, I've said it a few times in the show. The time capsule is being very preserved here, so we sort of get a sense of what general audiences were thinking about Star Wars, and in this case, Empire Strikes Back, right when it was released. And so you'll hear some very interesting questions here. You'll hear some like ignorant things being said because people just don't, it's so new, people just don't know it that well at the time. And so on. So we'll start the press conference off with a reporter asking a question of Anthony Daniels about C-3PO's silver leg in Empire Strikes Back. You notice his shin is silver in Empire Strikes Back. And that wasn't really something that was very obvious in A New Hope. I remember back in 1980 being very surprised that a lot of the stills and promotional footage or trading cards, whatever, featured C-3PO having this silver-plated shin. It's like, what's up with that? Well, one of the reporters noticed this and also asked a question at the same time about Yoda's mentioning the other. No, there is another. Who's the other? So this reporter asks Anthony Daniels and Gary Kurtz about those two very topics.
Two questions, probably a little insignificant, but to Anthony. Why does C-3PO have a silver shin this time? And Yoda mentioned a new character. There is another one. Have we met him yet, or will we meet him?
I like that line too. It took me by surprise. The silver leg, in fact, was there all through the first film. 3PO, it seems, had undergone spare part surgery before the film started. But what was odd is that, of course, it doesn't really... Well, in the first film, it didn't really photograph silver. And on the very last day of filming, the stills man came up to me and said, why does 3PO have a silver leg? And he had been shooting me all through for, 18 weeks. So, for all the rest of us who missed it, don't worry. I think they made a mistake I have a new costume for this one, and I think they made a mistake. They put it on the wrong leg or something, but it was too late to change it.
It gave the character a great... It's sort of
a bit of sympathy, I think, that he'd lost a leg somewhere. Yes.
As far as the other part of the question, no, it is not a character that we've met yet.
Yeah. Now, one thing I wanted to mention here, and we talked to Anthony Daniels a couple of years ago, and he was talking about how there was a period of time, Jim, where Lucasfilm didn't really want to put him out there as an actor, as a personality, because they didn't want to ruin the illusion that 3PO was a real robot, was a real droid. It seems as though, and we have, and to his point, when we were looking at the Lee Phillips show and we were looking at the WGN interview, no Anthony Daniels, he's nowhere to be found. Here we go, fast forward to Empire Strikes Back, and it seems like this might have been the time when they did decide to start putting Anthony out there as a member of the cast proper.
Well, it was impossible to avoid by the time 1980 rolled around. Kids everywhere were seeing the credits for Star Wars and memorizing them. And it'd be, who's Dave Prowse? Who's Anthony Daniels? Who's Kenny Baker? Who's Peter Mayhew? These are things that people were asking, and those names got just naturally attached to those characters. And so by the time Empire rolled around, it was impossible to avoid the participation of human beings as far as creating these characters.
Right.
You have to understand, I think the original Star Wars, when it was launched in 1977, it went through a lot of the traditional methods a film would be promoted as if it was a one and done. So the idea of really applying humanity to things that were largely considered a special effect, like C-3PO and R2-D2 and Darth Vader even. Back then, it was something just that they kind of kept on the down low, probably to minimize the exposure of the inner workings and maintain that mystery.
Right.
So
there may have been also a practical budgetary reason too, where you can only send so many people from your film out there. It's costing you money to get them out there. And so by the time Empire comes out, this is the biggest movie of all time. And so everyone's there, from the producers to Dave Prowse and Anthony Daniels. And so it's really interesting to see the evolution from those kind of lean years of promoting this little independent sci-fi film. And now we've got a bona fide blockbuster before it even comes out.
Yeah, that's just it. It's all a question of surface level. With the original Star Wars, they only would present you with interview opportunities with the people whose faces you saw on screen.
Yeah.
Who you could identify on screen and off screen as that character. But when you're dealing with actors like Kenny Baker, Anthony Daniels, David Prowse, etc., those characters are nothing more than mere images, surface level. But as Star Wars grew in popularity, it started to get picked apart and by fans who were very passionate and wanted to know more about the people who brought us this film. And it wasn't even just the people on screen. It was the behind the scenes people like John Dykstra, like Ben Burt, like George Lucas.
Yeah.
Nobody thought about directors like George Lucas. Nobody cared about who George. That was the first director I ever actually knew as a kid. I didn't know anything about film directing. I thought they were all like Rita Moreno on the Electric Company with the "Hey, you guys," with the microphone, all that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's when you talk about the names and the familiarity. I mean, I was definitely one of those kids. Like, I was 6 years old, and I could recite, Mark Hamill, Carrie Fisher, Harrison Ford, Kenny Baker, Anthony Daniels, David Prowse, before I even really had any great understanding what actors did or any of that. But the crew as well. And so it was something they couldn't hide anymore. That's the point. They couldn't hide an Anthony Daniels because we wanted to know everything we could know about these actors and the characters.
They couldn't hide. And apparently they did hide C-3PO's silver shin. Anthony Daniels revealed that was part of the character in A New Hope. But the camera just didn't pick it up enough. It wasn't obvious enough. So by the time they rolled around to do an Empire Strikes Back, they made it more silver so that the camera lens would pick up on it and imply a certain history to the droid. But according to Anthony Daniels, by the time Empire Strikes Back rolled around, they made the wrong shin silver. It was like his left shin, but they made the right shin silver. I forget what it is. But the other question about who is Yoda referring to when he says, no, there is another. Kurtz answers very briefly at the end of that question. He says, the person Yoda is talking about has yet to be revealed. It's a new character. So that just shows you there was a shift, and we all know about it. There was a dramatic shift in the way George Lucas was rolling out this story. He thought it would roll into then episodes 7, 8, and 9. Coming off of the original trilogy. But he decided to quit Star Wars at that point and made Leia the character that Yoda was talking about out of sheer convenience and because he was going to conclude the whole story at episode 6.
Had to wrap it up.
And then wrap it all up. Because, like, you would have figured that after 1983 and Return of the Jedi was released, George Lucas would start working on episode 7, the next trilogy. And that was his plan, I believe, when cameras began to roll on Return of the Jedi. But somewhere along the way, or even before the cameras started to roll, while he was developing the script, somewhere in that process, he said, I have to step away from Star Wars. It's damaging my life. Yeah. And that was George's mindset at that point. He had to leave Star Wars out of desperation, thus leaving a ton of money on the table. But the plan was to continue Star Wars going to episode 12. And then George would have shifted back to do episodes 1, 2, and 3. The prequels would have been the last thing he did. But then that began to shift, and then he began to tell Mark Hamill, we'll bring you back for episode 7 when you're like 60 years old. And Hamill is in his, early 30s at this point in time, thinking like, oh, God, man, that's going to be forever. And then George started to wrap it up, thinking to himself, well, I'll get back to the prequels. I'll do the prequels first then. And then I'll tell my story after Return of the Jedi. But, maybe I'll just sell the whole company to Disney and be done with it. But right, you hear, I just like the obvious examples, the obvious evidence that proves that George Lucas was shifting the story around as life presented challenges to him, and he decided to wrap Star Wars up.
Also conspicuous by his absence here at this press conference, Jim. Gary Kurtz is there. Irwin Kershner is there. No George Lucas.
Right. And I think that's by design. I think George wanted to separate himself a little bit from this production and really be more focused on the actual story itself. And Kirsch is directly asked about George Lucas. What kind of presence did George have on the set? Was he looking over your shoulder all the time? Is it true? I guess there was a rumor floating around in the media at this time in 1980 that George Lucas himself was closed off from the set. He was shut out by Irwin Kershner and the producers, that George himself was not even allowed on the set of Empire Strikes Back. And here we have Irwin Kershner himself, the great Kirsch, responding to a question about that very topic.
I have a question for the director. Is it true that George Lucas had a tough time getting on the set for this one? Or?
Well, he never knew that I had bodyguards keeping him off. No, actually, George was busy with other things. He was trying to set up other films, and he came over a few times for a few days, look around, see what the sets looked like, look at some rushes, just sort of look in on the production. Actually, George acted more like the writer than he did like as a producer, because Gary was a producer and Gary was along on location all the time. George had no problems at all getting on. In fact, he was reluctant to ever come anywhere near the camera when we were working. And I'd look around and here we'd be standing way in the back, sort of trying to see over the heads of people working there. And no, he came on when he wanted to, but it wasn't very often.
Yeah, wasn't very often. And by the way, if you're watching the, hopefully you're watching the all access full show video here, I was able to find some photos that I believe, I don't know for sure, but I believe were from this event. And unfortunately, there's a lot of photos of Carrie and Harrison together. There's a good one of Dave Prowse sitting there, but very scarce. Not a lot of photos exist, but some of the information I was able to look at points to maybe these being from that event. But Irvin,
I believe it is.
Yeah, nice to hear.
I was researching this a little bit,
Yeah.
and these photos all line up. Yeah.
Right. Nice to hear from
good old
Kirsch,
Kirsch.
as it always is. Very different story, Jim, on the set of Empire versus what will later happen on the set of Return of the Jedi. Very different.
Well, we were talking earlier about how there's always a fall guy. There's always a fall guy. And a lot of fans wonder, why didn't Gary Kurtz work on Return of the Jedi? What's up with that? He worked on American Graffiti. He worked on Star Wars. He worked on Empire Strikes Back. Where did it fall apart with George Lucas? Well, I think it's all right there in that answer from Kirsch. George didn't really work as a producer on the set of Empire Strikes Back. He served more like a writer, according to Kirsch. So Kirsch would probably, connect with him over story ideas, etc. And this all seems very consistent with what's in Alan Arnold's The Making of Empire Strikes Back book, and of course J.W. Rinsler's Making of Empire Strikes Back book as well. As George was relatively hands-off with the actual filmmaking process. George would hang in the back and try to look over people's shoulders to see at monitors, but he wouldn't really go near cameras or anything like that. He was very much drew a line between himself, George Lucas, the storyteller, and the other filmmakers. He was not serving the role as George Lucas, filmmaker necessarily, when it came to Empire Strikes Back. He was much more focused on the story, and that largely is a result of the anxiety George suffered while he was creating the original Star Wars film, and why he was reluctant to be very involved on the set. But Kirsch does reveal that George laid low. And as I said about the thing about scapegoats, it's possible that Rain Roberts was let go of Lucasfilm in the wake of the failure of The Acolyte. And I also believe that Gary Kurtz was let go from Star Wars way back when. The drum beat remains the same. Gary Kurtz did not work on Return of the Jedi because Empire Strikes Back ran too long as far as the shooting schedule and went over budget. And George Lucas was furious about that. It cost him a lot of money at a point in time when, George didn't have unlimited funds in the bank account. He was funding the entire production out of his pocket based on his earnings from Star Wars. So if Empire goes over budget, if Empire's shooting schedule extends way beyond what it should have been, thus costing a ton of money, and Empire doesn't connect with audiences, George Lucas is screwed. And in that moment, that is very much a possibility. The success of Star Wars is not a sure thing based on one movie. George knows audiences are fickle. George knows the box office can be unpredictable. And George knows that he put just about every dime he had into Empire Strikes Back.
He reinvested all that he made from Star Wars into Empire Strikes Back. Direct reinvestment, and into ILM and the other companies that he...
Right. This wasn't a 20th Century Fox production.
No.
This was pure Lucasfilm. And George was funding the whole thing. And it's something he learned from his buddy Coppola, Francis Ford Coppola, who basically, the fact that Coppola survived shooting Apocalypse Now to this day still speaks volumes about that guy's character, because he almost lost everything on Apocalypse Now. And George saw this, and George very much used Francis Ford Coppola's career as a blueprint for his own. And that's why he claimed ownership of all the things he did, and that's why he funded his own productions. Didn't need the studio. So that's Kirsch talking about Lucas. not on the set very often, and not being an imposing person on the set. But by the time Return of the Jedi rolled around, of course, he had to take reins. He had to grasp the reins because of the fact that Empire Strikes Back did go over budget and could have been a disaster had it not been so successful.
Yeah.
Right. It's a gamble. It's a gamble, you know? You know how gamblers act. All right, so here I'm going to play one more clip and then we're going to wrap it up. And we'll give you more of this press conference in upcoming weeks here on Rebel Force Radio because I've only gone through half of it. I still haven't gone through all of the individual interviews the one-on-ones that happen.
Okay, great.
Via the junket. So this is all just press conference stuff. But here we're going to hear from the entire cast kind of summing up how the success of the original Star Wars film changed their lives and made an impact on them as far as their careers go. So they start off with Harrison, who, of course, is very much as focused as he was then as he is now. It's all about the work, you know? It's all about the work.
Yeah.
When a film is such a success, it gives you a tremendous new opportunity to work, and that's the best thing about it for me. Same as everybody else, I'm sure.
I want to be. No, I've only seen the film with like the effects crew up north, and I saw it for the first time with a lot of Fox employees. I haven't really seen it with the people that made it the success it was, and I'm really looking forward to that because they were kind enough to build our entrances for that kind of response. And
well, it took place. It happened, and there was applause from the minute the music began, which I thought was significant as well.
I'm really excited about it. I really, really am excited about it, and it's not something that you can muster up. If you're disappointed, I think it will come out, and not until we saw it all cut together and what they'd left out and what they accentuated did I really realize. I mean, I really feel like the story's just beginning to be told, and it certainly, in my case, pays off a certain, style that I chose to take on in the first one. Hi, Carrie.
Hi. I can shoot a gun very well now, and with my per diem, I got a lot of new furniture. I get up a little easier in the morning, although I still am not very good at it, as you can see. So as far as that goes, it does enable you to get, new opportunities for work, although one tends to think of me as Princess Leia or, no, we know her work, so we don't want to see her. They sort of expect me to come in with the hair and something like that. But it's, a terrific opportunity to work in a business where there's much more supply than demand. And so we have an opportunity to do all these sequels or episodes.
Yeah, they thought that this was going to just keep on going. There was going to, like you were saying earlier, there was going to be a 6 and a 7 and an 8 and a 9 and it was going to keep on going. By the way, could they have gotten somebody to fix the damn feedback on those microphones? Well, in those environments, it's hard. It's hard.
1980 is,
But Harrison had the
just
shortest
the fact
answer.
that this recording exists is amazing.
It's a
if
miracle.
You ask me. Just the fact that this recording exists, uncut, just hearing the raw footage to me is very valuable.
Yeah, Harrison with the shortest answer. By the way, there was another female voice in there that I knew wasn't
the reporter.
Carrie. That was the reporter. Okay.
Right. Yeah, she was going back and forth. She was a very flamboyant personality who really made, at one point, I mean, I didn't include her question because it went on for like 5 minutes. She made the whole press conference about herself.
Oh, boy.
And I'm like, okay, this is Hollywood. Yes, indeedy. So the more things change, the more they stay the same.
Yeah.
This is Hollywood.
For sure. Well, this has been so much fun. I love this stuff. I know our listeners love this stuff. And there's just something about hearing how fresh and in the moment this all was. And I'm glad that this is just the start. We're going to have more clips of this in future Rebel Force Radio podcasts. So this is awesome. Thanks for bringing us this. This has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, good stuff.
Chewie, get us out of here!
Well, we always have fun here on Rebel Force Radio. That's what it's about. Having fun, talking Star Wars with our friends, all of you in the listening audience. It's always a good time. And we've been through a lot, you know. I was thinking about the fact that we've clocked, I think, I did a little calculations over the weekend. We're somewhere almost to 800 episodes of Rebel Force Radio.
Yeah, I think it's more than that.
You think
and then, I think there's a place where I can look to see that exact number.
Oh, you can find the exact number? Okay, all right.
But that's just Rebel Force Radio. I mean, we did 6-7 years of Star Wars podcasting before the first episode of Rebel Force Radio even began. And on top of that, I was doing certain Star Wars radio specials on CBS Radio in the early 2000s. That kind of, to me, formed the foundation for what I do in Star Wars podcasting. I was just so lucky to find Jason Swank out there, doing exactly what I wanted to do.
I just had a thought. Oh, my gosh. How long is it going to be until those first few shows that we did are considered vintage? Will people be listening?
Vintage. Oh, dude.
Rebel Force
we're definitely
Radio,
vintage. We're definitely vintage, my God. Some people... Here's something interesting I want to throw at you, is that I was looking at something online today that claimed that Star Wars from the 70s was Star Wars, that was the boomers era for Star Wars. Boomers era for Star Wars. And I want to correct that just real briefly. Star Wars is, if you want to look at the origin of Star Wars and the origin of fandom, you don't have to look anywhere past Generation X. Star Wars is specifically a Generation X triumph.
Yeah.
Because Generation X, Gen X, we were kids, and we were the audience for Star Wars. And we are the audience that would not go away, and we're not going anywhere. So Star Wars survived the dark times of the mid-'80s through the 90s, and Gen X was there. And then we, of course, hold the door wide open for all the millennials, all the Gen Y, the Gen Z, and yes, even the boomers. But it is Gen X that absorbed Star Wars in the 70s. It was Gen X. By that time, the baby boomers were like, they outgrew anything like Star Wars. They enjoyed it, but it
through
wasn't
us, through the Gen X. They bought the tickets for us to go see it.
Yeah.
But beyond that,
our moms and dads and all of that.
Wow.
And then occasionally I would bring the greatest generation into it when I hoodwinked my grandma and Aunt Marge once to take me to Star Wars when my parents were out of town. And I never forget Aunt Marge saying, well, I heard that movie gives you seizures. And I had to explain to Aunt Marge, you won't get seizures, or I don't think you'll get seizures from this, but I mean,
there had to be
we're
a party
talking about,
Jim, that you walked into that theater with Aunt Marge. Had to be a party. They wondered, oh my God, what if Aunt Marge is right?
But what if Aunt Marge is convulsing in the aisle of the movie theater as the Falcon is trying to blast its way out of Mos Eisley? What am I going to do? I'm 8 years old. What the hell am I going to do? That's when I lean on a Billy Mac, who is the younger of the two of us. Billy was like 5 at that. I wonder I wonder if Billy Mack remembers the time I was able to hoodwink Grandma and Aunt Marge to take us to see Star Wars. And they were blown away, man.
Oh, I bet.
mean, we're talking about going to see Star Wars with people who were born in the year 1900. Okay?
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, 1977. Yeah, that math all adds up. So,
Man.
and Aunt Marge did survive. I don't think her wig did, but she did. She definitely did.
She blew her wig.
She blew her wig. Oh my God.
Oh my gosh. Well, if you need more Rebel Force Radio in your life, and why wouldn't you? The best place to get that is over on Patreon. That's right. Just go to the Rebel Force Radio website, rebelforceradio.com, or you can go to patreon.com and either search for Rebel Force Radio or just go to patreon.com/Rebel Force Radio. But either way, what you're going to find is a fantastic extension of your listening experience, Rebel Force Radio. There's exclusive podcasts that you're not going to find anywhere else, including things like full show video. But what really drives, I think, most of the excitement in Rebel Force Radio Patreon supporters is the fact that you're getting a series of podcasts that no one else is hearing. That's the Q&A, that's the Babu Freaks, RPG. So these are, like we say, exclusive, and we really mean exclusive to Patreon supporters. So, Jim, anything recently that you want to mention here that is happening in the world of RFR Patreon?
Yeah, our good friend RFR VIP superstar Eric from Phoenix walks us through all of his experiences at Star Wars Celebration 2017 on the latest RFR Q&A. And it's a lot of fun because some of my memories from Star Wars Celebration 2017 flood in as well. And we have a really good time, talking about the lines and the overnight lines. And then we talk about the lines inside the convention center. And Eric did make it into a couple of panels. God bless him. After waiting in all those lines. And we also talk about how much better the lottery system is for Star Wars celebrations in the wake of 2017 and how great that's been. But we do talk a lot about the lines at Star Wars 2017. And Eric has a great photo gallery for those who are supporters of RFR on Patreon on the RFR All Access tier. They get to see the full show video, and Eric walks us through a great photo gallery of his experience at Star Wars Celebration 2017. So he also shows off some new collectibles he scored and a recent visit he made to Star Wars Galaxy's Edge in Anaheim. So we have a lot of fun getting caught up. RFR Q&A, it's on Patreon exclusively, patreon.com/Rebel Force Radio. Join the community. Join the movement.
The whole
RFR
movement.
on Patreon.
All right.
It's a movement. I figured if it's a movement, it's a little more, that's a call to action right there. That's what they got. Call to action.
And Rebel Force Radio is, of course, available on YouTube, as we were talking about. Our podcast adventures go back many years, and a lot of that is documented over on YouTube, including a documentary about Rebel Force Radio, how we came to be, how Mac and I found each other, and all of that. So that's all there. So check us out over on YouTube. Please subscribe, like, and comment today. We're on all the socials. We're on X. We're on Twitter or Instagram. We're on Threads. We're on Blue Sky. We're on Facebook. You can find us all there at Rebel Force Radio. And, of course, the website for all things and everything, Rebel Force Radio, rebelforceradio.com. And if you really want to help us out, the best way to do that is to do what you're doing right now. Dedicate a couple hours each week to listen to RFR. Better yet, refer Rebel Force Radio to your friends, your family, your co-workers, the Star Wars fan in your life that maybe hasn't gotten around to finding Rebel Force Radio. Make the recommendation. We love it. They really do help grow the operation here at Rebel Force Radio. So thank you for all of those recommendations through the years. You are the best advertising mechanism we have. You're the only advertising mechanism we have, to be honest. So please keep referring your friends, your family to Rebel Force Radio. That'll wrap it up for us this week. We'll be back next week with more Rebel Force Radio. Looking forward to it already. So until next time, for RFR, I'm Jason.
I'm Jimmy May.
And remember,
The Force will be with you, always.
Always.
I love you.
I know.